The average person touches their face 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, and each other.
Your town is being quarantined.
We got 19 dead. You got 100 more infected. It's spreading like a brush fire.
What are you talking about?
A deadly virus capable of contaminating the entire world has been released.
Killer plagues have always made an appearance in media and movies, but with the outbreak of COVID-19, these same movies have gotten a lot harder to watch.
Hello? Hello?
The coronavirus is a very real disease impacting every single person worldwide, not just those that have been exposed to it. Countries have been attempting to take measures to stop the spread of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes the disease, but that has caused many people to be locked inside their houses, unable to receive a stable paycheck. For some individuals and families in poverty, this isn't a new situation. The U.S. Department of Human Services has a few poverty guidelines depending on how many people are in a family, but if you're only to consider one person, they're in poverty if they only make $12,760 a year. Situations may vary around these families. Some of them could be struggling to pay off a mortgage or put their children through school, but oftentimes, families struggle with one of the most basic necessities of all, getting food. A lot of people are feeling the pressure of going grocery shopping lately. Maybe they have to stand far from other shoppers, or there's a line outside. Others are having trouble mustering up enough money to afford just basic goods. That's why food banks are so particularly important in the heat of the COVID madness. They've always been a good medium for helping out struggling families, but especially now, food banks are taking COVID into consideration during their work. Take Feeding Westchester as an example. It's a local food bank for me, based in Elmsford, New York. Access to food is a basic human right, so it's an organization that works with other partners, like food pantries in individual towns in the county, to help bring food to people who request it. Food donations differ. Some people host food drives, some people volunteer at soup kitchens to create the food, and others can even bring goods and fresh produce that's redistributed around the country. Feeding Westchester is an example of a food bank close to me, which is why it's so important to consider food banks that are close to you. Food banks are facing some increases in food movement, however, and that's specifically because of COVID. Feeding Westchester had to distribute more than 1.4 million pounds of food, which was said to have been a 77% increase from what they usually give out. The impact is undeniable. From not being able to donate food at all for fear of contagion, to being forced to work even longer and harder once they could open donations once again, food banks are facing a lot of difficulty in the current climate. You could say food banks are one of the services that will hopefully not exist in a long time, if people can one day reach the point where everyone is well fed. But that's a bit of an abstract concept, and a movie ending like that in everyday life is not that easy. That's why people shouldn't doubt the necessity of food banks during COVID. If people were struggling to eat before, things have to have worsened during the pandemic, especially because poverty numbers are scheduled to rise as a result of the pandemic. The American Research Institute Brookings has coined a term known as the COVID effect, which they're particularly using to explain the huge changes in the number of people in poverty worldwide. Although their measurements do always have a degree of uncertainty, as is the nature of such varied scientific research, Brookings estimates that about 690 million people are likely to be in poor households by 2020, while the previous measurement was 640 million people. It's a difficult pill to swallow, and as everyday people, it often seems like we can do very little to make a dent in that number. But there's options, and, in my opinion, helping food banks is a pretty good one. Helping a family eat could mean they could put their money into other expenditures, like education or their house. The internet makes it a lot simpler. There's Amazon Smile, for example, which donates some of your money from a purchase to a charity of your choice. Plus, it can help you discover other worthwhile charities that need just as much support. The point is, it can be intimidating, especially in the middle of a global pandemic, to find ways to help your community, which could often be suffering in ways you did not expect. But you never know how much of an impact you can have until you actually try and make an impact.